Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Let's return to the real world. I'm delighted to be speaking in this hugely important debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. As most of the Chamber will know, this is a topic I have particular interest in and have spoken on many times here. I had hoped to have a constructive debate because I know that the Cabinet Secretary can also have a pragmatic approach to this topic, and we have had many constructive conversations in the past. However, surely the fact that Mairi Gougeon has to stand up in this chamber and defend what is the most ridiculous motion from the government must leave her embarrassed. All the things we could have discussed, all the actions we could take in this Parliament to positively address this issue, many of which I know the Cabinet Secretary supports, have been swept away under the SNP Green mantra of "not our fault, Gov." The Green-driven government agenda, far from improving our food security, is making it increasingly difficult for our food producers to continue. According to the noisy minority, farms need to decarbonise. They need to stop producing as much beef. They need to plant more trees. They must diversify, all with a lack of support, of course, from this government. Now, I met with the agri-tourism sector this week, and I have to say the only politician from 5 that turned up to listen to them and answer their questions, by the way. And a wonderful visit it was too. The retail value of agri-tourism has increased by almost 50 million in the last year, rising to over 110 million. They are such an enthusiastic and resilient bunch, taking the blows landed on them by the Scottish Government, getting back up and finding a way to keep developing. But some farmers have been forced into diversification to make ends meet because simply producing food is not good enough anymore. These are the people who produce our food, Deputy Presiding Officer. Farmers have been left to their own to sort out their local food chains. Smaller businesses find it hard to access public procurement and have little guidance on how to establish cooperatives. I'll give way to the member.
Jim Fairley.
Thank Brian Whittle for giving way. Does Brian Whittle understand that farmers have been diversifying for as long as they've been farming?
Brian Whittle.
Yes, I do understand that, and as I say, what a wonderful bunch they are, despite the policies of this government. I was told by those in the room that it feels like there are no policy or financial support for agri-tourism from the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government should be promoting agri-tourism to... give me a second. The Scottish Government should be promoting agri-tourism to advertise the value of local food chains and Scottish rural businesses. I will give way to the Cabinet Secretary if she will reply directly to the agri-tourism.
Cabinet Secretary.
That's exactly why I wanted to stand up and give an intervention, because I'm really sorry to actually hear that, and that's the feedback that you've had, because I would ask that you recognise the near £500,000 that we have contributed to ensure that we can run more agri-tourism monitor farms, absolutely in recognition of how important agri-tourism is. I also co-chair a board with Caroline Miller because we want to see agri-tourism grow in Scotland, and that is why we've made the financial commitment to do that.
Brian Whittle.
Well, interestingly, we mentioned it in our motion, and one of the things they actually raised was planning policy to developed predominantly by urban areas, by urban MSPs. It's too stringent, it's too slow, it's too bureaucratic, with some policies not even fit for rural areas, preventing diversification and development of the rural economy. So given the SNP's Greens vilification of our farmers, perhaps a solution would be to eat more fish. Well, wait a minute. Apparently the SNP coalition have decided our fishermen have got to stop catching fish. They've got to develop better methods of protecting the environment. They have to innovate. But again, the Scottish Government are not going to help them. In fact, the SNP Green government apparently have decided that HPMAs will be imposed on 10% of our seas. But they won't tell you where this will happen or where that percentage came from. And I've already taken one from you, where that percentage came from. Because, of course, there is no scientific evidence or data to back this policy up, according to the Cabinet Secretary herself in an answer to the question in this chamber. Retrospectively, they then do a consultation and wonder why coastal communities are up in arms and why fishing communities are so universally against this policy. And after introducing all of these anti-food producing policies from predominantly urban-based politicians, they seem surprised that this kind of cack-handed way of treating our food producers is so unpopular. How does the Scottish Government expect the sector to invest in their businesses? And how can they not recognise the impact on recruitment and retention this uncertainty of this policy brings? It is almost as though the Scottish Government have forgotten that we actually need to eat food. And the more pressure they put on our food-producing sector, the more it will disappear, requiring more and more of our food to be imported, which is exactly the opposite of food security. The Greens are a one-dimensional, ideologically driven bunch with no grip on reality. I don't know what colour the sky is on their planet, but it's definitely not green. Their policies, far from delivering a more sustainable economy, are actually adding to the climate emergency. They have this delusion of adequacy. And the SNP are blindly following them in for the sake of the Butte House Agreement. So let's talk about food security. Let's consider the difference it would make if we focused on real policies that would have a real impact. How about the fact that we waste a third of our food? If food waste was a country, it would be the third biggest greenhouse gas emitter after China and the USA. It takes an area the size of China to produce the food that we throw away. So let's consider this in terms of the increasing squeeze on land use and Scottish Government policy, specifically putting our food producers' land under pressure. How about reducing transport miles for their food undergoes? I've spoken about this since I've entered this place. Public procurement of our food, making sure our fantastic quality of produce we get from our farmers and fishermen and women make its way into our school meals, into our hospitals and into every other government building. That would reduce greenhouse gases considerably, contribute to the reduction in road miles, another of the Scottish Government targets without a route map, get our pupils used to eating local produce, supporting our food producers, improving our poor health record. You know, that joined-up thinking. What about recognising that the sea is three-dimensional and we can use the surface area for certain industries such as floating wind, but also use the depth for seaweed farming, creating reefs and seagrass plantations that act as fish nurseries as well as carbon sequestration areas? There's no need for government to impose HPMAs, joined up, three-dimensional thinking. Yet, instead of thinking outside the box, encouraging and rewarding innovative solutions already deployed by our food producers, solutions that would directly tackle food security, all the while supporting a rural economy, impacting on the health of our nation, encouraging more pupils to consider a career in the rural economy, the Cabinet Secretary finds herself in a position of having to defend the Scottish Government amendment that is content to wash its hands of any responsibility and blame the UK Government, the food producers, anywhere else that means they do not have to take any positive action. Deputy Presiding Officer, SNP policy is being dictated by the Green Party, who live in a dreamland. A Green Party who are the least green of any Green Party on this planet. It's time to start being a government and realise you actually have to deliver some policies. Deputy Presiding Officer.